Now let me start off with a very controversial statement. Poprad is not the prettiest town in Slovakia. Well, that's not the point. The point here is not to be pretty. The point is stuff should be happening as people come here to go later into the Tatra mountains, and maybe after visiting the mountains they want to have some fun. So unfortunately, Tatra mountains we are not going to see at the very moment. The weather was not very good, it's all behind clouds and fog, but people in Poprad don't care if it's good weather or not, they want to have some fun, and suddenly Mediterranean and Latin vibes abound. You were not expecting to hear something like that, eh? So this is Poprad right here for you. Now before we go to the mountains, let me tell you about a very, I think, controversial person that is very much connected to Poprad and a very interesting place beside the Tatras. Now let me tell you about a gentleman called Jan Teleński. So he was born 1948 in today's Czech Republic, Czechia. He was told when he was young that after primary school, no more education, he will have to work probably as a miner or such. Now he didn't feel that way. But in the meantime, 68, the Prague Spring, the Soviet and the Warsaw Pact tanks arrived, and supposedly he was actively throwing rocks at them in Prague. Anyway, Prague Spring lost, and he decided to emigrate, seeing no more future in his own country. A year later, in 69, he lands in Luton, north of London, with £2 in his pocket and no English. Fortunately, well, actually slept like 2 weeks in a cemetery, he said, but fortunately, a friend of a friend, he found a cheap room, he found a simple job, and then kept finding more jobs. So of course, first construction, then security, some other things. So he earns better and better, and whatever he earns, he invests into the language. Several years pass, and there's a local shop catering to Eastern Europeans, basically all the immigrants from behind the Iron Curtain. The business is failing, so Teleński bought it cheap, and he starts making profit very quickly. In the end, after several years, he sold it for very good money, which he invested into 4 ruined houses around London, which he then himself renovates and starts renting out. Good money, so he keeps on doing the same, hence entering into the world of real estate. Then he starts working for one big real estate company. He soon becomes the company manager for the UK, eventually thinking, why work for another if he can actually do it himself? So he left, he started his own company, which within several years made the original company bankrupt, so he bought it again for cheap. And then comes 89, fall of communism here. He comes back to Czechoslovakia, still Czechoslovakia in 89, and starts his businesses here. Now, why am I telling you about him in Poprad? Why am I saying he's a modern Beniowski? Well, first of all, there is one thing he shares with Beniowski, most probably. What you just heard, most probably, is plenty of BS. When I started reading about him, every single website, it's pretty much his own tale, and it's copy-pasted. And I haven't found any kind of independent information whether all of that is true or not. It sounds to me like a modern Beniowski kind of memoir, so to speak. But what he does not share with Beniowski, he did not die in any accidents or anything at 40 plus. He lives still and is very successful. Definitely not the king of Madagascar, but definitely king of Poprad. He came here beginning of the 21st century with one thing in mind. He found out there's a big subterranean lake 2 kilometers down from where we are right now with very hot water. So he decided to establish Aqua City. So a typical water park, well, typical at first glance, but not typical in the sense that it's pretty much self-reliable. For example, all the heating comes, thanks to modern technology, all the heating comes from that subterranean lake, which has very hot water. So it started winning from very first day some ecological prizes, and I think it still does till the very day. So that's one curious thing. Then he introduced to Slovakia the idea of cryotherapy. So basically therapy through freezing. So you can get frozen for a number of minutes till the very day in his place. And pretty much he brought jobs here. I think hundreds or even thousands of people have jobs in the Aqua City and around it. Sounds too good to be true? Well, I think some people would agree. There, of course, are critics. Now, first of all, the main issue is that his autobiography most probably is partly an invention. Secondly, people say he likes politicians too much, taking photos and getting to know them very well. Actually, he when he came to Poprad to build Aqua City, turns out that the mayor of Poprad was a good friend of his, which is fine, but then turns out the mayor bought a big house in London, rather cheap. Interesting. Anyway, that's another issue, supposedly. Another one is that he doesn't like some offices, like for example the tax office. As a wealthy man, he's involved, of course, in things like charity, but supposedly not all charities are very happy with his work. And another critique is he promises plenty and he usually does not keep his word. Some charities, for example, would say that. Anyway, what definitely is true is that Mr. Teleński is connected to Poprad very much, not only through the Aqua City and the cryotherapy and the hotels and the such, but through, for example, this monument here, which has kinda his signature and the year 2022. So even pretty much today he is in the city, or maybe not anymore. I've got news. I'm not sure because, well, I was reading in Slovak, so I might have misunderstood something, but he is about to, or he already sold Aqua City to some Bratislava investors. So in the end, his love for Poprad lost against business, against the money. It comes as no surprise that the pandemic, the coronavirus, hurt places like Aqua City a lot. Now, I think it is making money again. I think it is still a big draw, besides the Tatras, of course, for people to come here. When I was there and you saw a bit of footage, the car park was full. So I think the people are back. It's making money again. What I can tell you for sure, though, he's still around. A couple of months ago in London, he got another medal for something that he did, either in eco business or something else. Anyway, something that sounded pretty fine. So, is he an angel? Is he a fake? Can't tell. But Aqua City sounds legit in terms of ecology, and if that's true, that it's pretty much the most eco aqua park in Europe or the world, perfect. Keep on building more such places. Fine with it. When it comes to criticisms, well, can't tell if it's true or not either, or it's people who are kind of jealous. But I think usually in such cases, the truth is somewhere there in the middle. But let me tell you this. I am pretty sure we are going to hear of Mr. Jan Teleński in the future again. So that's all very interesting and fine and so on. But in the end, if you're in Poprad, it's about the Tatra mountains. And what I love here is, as you can see now, it's completely flat, and suddenly, bam, you've got this huge wall of the mountains in front of you. Now, very curious thing about Poprad, it is not in the mountains, it's on this flat piece. In the mountains you have little towns and even villages spread around everywhere, and there is a fast train. Well, we were on a train, as you noticed a moment ago, and within 30 minutes, 40 minutes tops, you can be in the last stop. And it's pretty awesome because if you want a city, it's not in the mountains. It's not plenty of people, a huge crowd walking, as you can see. It's half empty. You want crowds? You're out of the mountains. You're in the mountains, you've got peace, which is perfect. So the town we are in is called Stary Smokovec. It's one of the first towns established for tourism, so to speak. So you will find not only huge kind of fancy hotels, but also plenty of little architecture. And you can see that here Carpathian Germans, the Spish Germans, were very much present through the architecture, which looks like you're in the Tyrolean or Bavarian village somewhere deep in the Alps, right? Unfortunately, not all of those fancy hotels survived. So here is one which, to be honest, even though it's ruined or half ruined, it is still very impressive. My guess as to the situation is that it takes too much money to actually renovate it as open as a hotel again, and it makes way more sense to simply build a completely modern one from scratch, because there are those old school hotels, but of course there's plenty of modern construction as well, as you can see right now. There's another piece of modern construction, and a very interesting one at that. 2004, there was a huge hurricane which destroyed thousands of hectares of trees, and those branchless ones here, those are the survivors of the hurricane. So normally when we have a monument, it's a monument to people, and here is a monument to a natural victim, forest, of a natural occurrence hurricane. And a very interesting phrase, it says, catastrophe is not action of nature, is the lack of action of humans. Go figure. Anyway, there were also human victims of the hurricane, and here is one of them. So that's a very unusual monument. One last little look at one last villa, both today and back 100 years ago, and we have to go to sleep, because early in the morning, 4:30 a.m., me alone, unfortunately Vicky had to go back to Kraków earlier, I am waking up to take a train to Sztyrbskie Pleso, which is the last stop and one of the gates to the Tatra mountains. And this is one of the most famous views on the internet from the Slovak Tatras, I think. So we are actually here to go into the mountains, but first I need to show you something very important for a Pole. They have here places for ski jumping, which is one of the few sports we Poles are good at. So it's a very important detail. Keep it in mind for later. But let me show you the reason for the name. Pleso is actually like a little lake, and early in the morning it looks rather magical. What looks a bit less magical is that, of course, it's filled with hotels all around, and already late 19th century people realized this is a cool place to build a little hut, and that was the guy who actually established the town. Looks rather fancy. Well, a Hungarian aristocrat, Józef Szentiványi. So good for him, but my favorite example of a person who lived here lived in Villa Marina in front of you in the 20th century. The most important Slovak poet, Masha Haliamova. My ladies, do look her up on the internet. Not only a great poet, but also ski jumper, and she was in 1935 the youngest judge during World Cup in ski jumping. poetry and ski jumping. Who would have thought, right? If you want exotic, 1934, King of Siam was here. And those are just the highlights. Plenty of things used to happen in Styrbskie Pleso. But I know, you want the mountains. Let's have them then. So it is time for the last point of our great Slovak adventure. It is time to go up the holy mountain for the Slovaks. It is time to go up Krivaň. Yep, I wasn't joking when I told you we're going into the mountains. We are going up the most important peak for the Slovaks. We are going up the famous Krivaň. But first of all, out of Styrbskie Pleso, we need to take something called Magistrala. Think of it as the main footpath at the feet of the mountains. So it's nice, it's flat, and you get a view on the ski jumping place from the back, which looks super post-apocalyptic here. Another post-apocalyptic thing, it's empty. I was expecting quite a lot of people. I know it's early in the morning, it's like 6:37. Yet, I was surprised. 1 hour of walking on the main walk and I was completely alone. After a bit more than an hour of a very nice walk, it's time for a pit stop, which means breakfast and of course some kofola for extra energy. But after that, the good times are gone. Now we are leaving the Tatra highway and it's time to go all the way up, my precious. So up we go indeed. Now let's have a quick look. It says 3 hours 15 minutes. Let's see what happens. But while going up, let me tell you about the big deal with this Krivaň mountain. See, the thing is, it's one of the most western mountains of the High Tatras, so it's kind of in your face. People would notice it. It has a very particular shape, and because it's in your face, people very often assumed, till the 18th century supposedly, that's the highest peak of the mountains. So it was famous already hundreds of years ago. But then 19th century Slovak poets of the Romanticism started writing about Tatra mountains, about Krivaň as well. So it picked up even more fame, and then famous people start coming. For example, King of Saxony himself, Frederick August. But maybe the most important person, not a crowned head, but yes, you guessed it, Ludovich Tur himself, 16th of August 1841, with his followers, went up Krivaň as well. And then there were people who started doing the same a year later, maybe some years later, usually in August, pretty much for anniversary. So in the modern times, it became something called Narodne Vylety, national trips, which take place every third weekend of August. Hundreds of people are involved. In the meantime, though, as you probably noticed, we've got some blueberries, but more importantly, alpine stages of flora. So we started with proper forest, then we had the mountain pine, and now mountain meadows, and very soon just pure rocks. We are indeed in alpine type mountains here. I guess you also noticed we were not very lucky with the weather. Complete fog everywhere. I was hoping for some nice views, but you can't have everything in life, right? But matters not, we continue up, and above 2000 meters it's only rock, and I started feeling like Gollum himself. My precious. Yep, that happens to my voice when I start scrambling up and down rocks. But wait a second, I was complaining about the fog, right? So sometimes you just have to start and hope for the best. And look, Krivaň now in front of you, and if that's not enough... You may ask, why? Why am I struggling to go up a mountain and all those rocks and everything? Well, not simply mountain. It's not simply a mountain, it's such views as well. One could sit here for an hour or two or a full day and enjoy. But we continue moving, because just a bit more, we're almost at the top, and suddenly there's music everywhere. So what's the deal with this very serious music? I mentioned Ludowit Sztur, right? One of his followers in 1844 wrote a poem to a very popular folk song, and that poem is about a storm beginning in the Tatra mountains, and that became the national anthem of Slovakia. That's pretty much what you heard, the very first part of it. What's a better place then to play the national anthem than the Tatra mountains, especially that the fourth verse, which isn't sung, mentions Kryvaň as well. So this is it, the last big stop on the Great Slovak Adventure, and I think by now I deserve some kind of honorary citizenship or something. Anyway, gotta go down now, right? So those ants that you see, it's mostly people going up. It is a very good idea to start in the mountains early, up plenty of people. I was pretty much alone going down. And I have to say, it said 3 hours 15 minutes, I went up in 2 hours and a bit. Not bad, eh? Also, even better, I was complaining about the fog, right? Going up. Going down, the clouds were still there, but the fog was not. And those are the amazing views I had walking down the mountain. I said you cannot have everything? Yes, you can. And here, I should start saying goodbye and finishing the Great Slovak Adventure officially, but we're not going to do it here. We're going to do it at a different time and a different place. My absolute highlight. It is October now, and the beautiful golden autumn is here, especially if you come to my home village, to Zavoja, at the feet of the Babia Góra mountain. It is indeed extremely picturesque. Natural Photoshop, one may say. But I'm actually not here to enjoy that only. Early morning, late October, and early morning means plenty of mist, and you can see it down in the valley. We are going into that carpet of mist. On the way, some beautiful views with the Tatra mountains showing above the mist. Not the Tatra mountains though is our destination. Destination is the mist itself, because now we're in it, in the forests on the other side of the mountain Babia Góra in very northern Slovakia. And we are here to find a little place that's hidden in those forests. That place was actually supposed to keep people safe from maybe brigands hiding in the forest themselves. Right in front of you right now, perched on a hill, is the Orava castle. But I guess first of all you deserve a couple of words of explanation why we have come here in the first place. There is really only one way to finish the Great Slovak Adventure. One of the first memories I have from my first visit to Slovakia is the Orava castle. And mind you, I do not come back to places. I've been here I think 6 times or 7 now. So that may be the best example of how emotionally I am linked to the spot. Maybe because it is simply beautiful, or maybe because it is one of the first places I visited when little. One way or another, doesn't matter. What matters is, because of my strong emotional connection to the place, let's put it like this: history makes a circle. My first impression of Slovakia should be then the last final stop on the Big Slovak Adventure. I think I should underline that I did visit quite a lot of places all around the world, some of them the most famous pearls of architecture, and yet it is this place that I keep coming back to, and each single time it is jaw-dropping. And I don't know if it's the emotional connection from childhood or the place is really so spectacular, but that's how it works for me. Just walking through those gates and those tunnels, it feels like I'm entering not simply a living Middle Ages, but some kind of a fairy tale country. So let's do it like this. In the meantime, we're lucky. The mists of the morning are gone and it's now nice and sunny. So let me take you through the castle, but as we have visited some castles already and the museums inside the castles quite extensively and in detail, so here we're gonna go through the castle museum, of course, but let's do it in a more relaxed way. Of course, I'm gonna show you the highlights, tell you a bit of history, but basically let's just enjoy the weather, enjoy the castle, and enjoy the moment. And there are instances here when really no words are good enough, and one of those moments is coming now. Let's go through the gate and just look up. I honestly find this moment breathtaking. I kind of feel like it's a set for a Hollywood film. It's not real. Well, fortunately, it is real. But I did promise you a bit of history. So first of all, let's have a look at the maquette. At the bottom, what you see are the middle and lower castles. They are basically from 15th, 16th century. The part that's kind of clinging to the rock at the top is the upper castle, and it was already built in the 13th century, so by far the oldest, and we're gonna go through it all. But now let's go back to the lower castle, because there are a number of interesting details. First of all, pillory. So this is from the 19th century, but it has the medieval look. It's basically a pole with chains. If you did something wrong, you would be brought here and chained for an hour or two. This was basically punishment of shame. It's pretty cool that they have it here, because there are few looking like they did back in the Middle Ages. Before we go up to the middle castle, let's go through the museum that is in the lower one. And let's start the walk with a very important coat of arms of a very important family called the Turso. They became owners of the castle in the middle of the 16th century, and pretty much what we see today is their work. Now let's start with George Turso, head of the family at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. One thing that he did not have, an official male heir. He had 7 daughters though, and he loved them dearly. He actually appeared in episode 5. We went to the town Bytcha, and I told you that there's a beautiful Renaissance building built for a wedding of a daughter by her father. So he's the father who built a building for a wedding of a daughter. That's love right there. So he also found husbands for them from very important families. And then he died, and those 7 daughters become heirs. And they decided on doing something very interesting. Those 7 daughters, with their husbands, so 14 people in total, started owning the castle and the whole region as something called compossessorat, so concurrent estate or co-tenancy. In other words, they were all owners of it, which, when you think about it, is an amazing thing. 14 people owning a place, and it worked more than 300 years until the end of the First World War. So they would usually, from their own circle, elect a person who would be kind of director of the estate. And one of those directors decided to turn the castle into a museum, and here's a little detail. He did it in 1868. This is officially one of the oldest museums in all of the Hungarian kingdom. Not bad, right? And then after the First World War, Czechoslovak state bought the estate. So the last director was Josef Palfi. Yes, of course, Palfis had to appear for our last episode. But let's go back to George Turso. He's also a very interesting example of double identity. He might have been a Hungarian aristocrat, but he would write his letters to his wife, for example, in Slovak, and considered himself as such as well. And if that's not enough, this is a kitchen from the time of George Turso. Everything about it is original, including the stains. The kitchen would also write their documents in Slovak. Another important piece by George Turso is the castle chapel, pretty much built for himself. And although he was officially Protestant, now this place looks rather Baroque, properly Catholic, right? Well, look at the portrayal of his wife. She is in black and white, very modest, typical of Protestants, late 16th century. Well, his epitaph is not modest at all. But then again,
Catholic or Protestant, money is money, I guess. But later their son, they did have one, but he died young. He was also buried here, and then some cousins and other family members. And from their graves we have the highlight of the museum. They were dressed in some proper 17th century clothing, which usually did not survive in good quality, and here the quality is actually perfect. Those tights, for example, are supposedly unique on the scale of the world, and for us it may sound rather silly, but for historians it's a very important detail. My favorite details were those though. The gowns here are woven so intricately and beautifully. Not only gowns though, another of my little highlights, look closely at this closet. It's not made of mother of pearl or something. It's made of wicker. Wicker, such simple material, and looks gorgeous as well. So while walking around those halls that important people used to walk through as well, we tend to forget that they were humans just like us, so they need also very particular places. So let's leave those beautiful halls for a moment and let's simply find a toilet. And I know it's kind of a taboo topic, but they were humans like us. They also needed toilets, and there are some around here as well. What the hell? My god, this guy thought it's a real toilet! Scandal! People have absolutely no shame! Security! Security! We have to take this guy to the pillory and chain him! Now don't worry, this is just my own father taking part in my little moment of infantilism. By the way, there really was a proper toilet there. Anyway, now that I ran up the stairs to the middle castle, let's have a little walk around the place as well. But first things first, there's something that every castle had to have, which is a well. Now we are not going to see the bottom, as it is, I think 60 to 80 meters deep. Anyway, let's have a look around the courtyard here, and you'll notice how much smaller it is than the courtyard of the lower castle. Now here we are taken to the second part of the 15th century, and a very important name appears. Legendary 15th century king of Hungary, Matthias Corvinus. Now he had a son who was not only less legendary, but he was also less legal. John Corvinus was an illegitimate child, but still a child of King of Hungary. So in the end he received this castle from his father, and John Corvinus is pretty much responsible for what you have around here today. Well, mostly in terms of walls, the external part, because what you see inside, typical thing, it's mostly late 19th century neo-Gothic. Look for example at this complete mishmash of symbols, including what we call today Star of David. Here it's a different thing, matters not. What matters is typical late 19th century furnishing. But I have to say, both the original Gothic exterior and the neo-Gothic late 19th century interior, they click together pretty well. But the most visible and I think most enchanting part of the castle is the tower that's in the middle of it. So let's go to the tower, but I have to kinda prepare for it first. A little issue I have that I mentioned several times already.
For the difficult part, I might have mentioned that I have a bit of vertigo. Well, so I have to prepare mentally for what's coming, and soon you are going to understand why.
There are those outside stairs and a balcony hanging above, as you can see here, the courtyard of the middle castle, and you're gonna see soon the balcony above the courtyard of the lower castle. And here's the trick. The very same episode, I took you to the Tatra mountains, nothing happens to me there, and here my legs are jelly already. I'm not afraid of natural heights, I'm afraid of man-made heights. At the very moment, although you see the courtyard, I am personally glued to the wall.
Right, I think that's enough. I know there is a fence and there's no way I could fall, but unfortunately, that's how vertigo works. I feel much better here inside.
Why have I even told you about this at all, you may ask? For two reasons. First of all, to show you that such an issue exists, and it's not exactly nice, although completely absurd. That's how vertigo works. But also, second thing is, even though one may have it, it doesn't deter from visiting awesome places. And here's a good example. Vertigo or not, we are pushing through and going up to the high castle, to the upper castle itself. And there's one good reason to fight your vertigo if you have it. That's pretty much what you get when you're up places. Some amazing views. But of course, there are limits. I would never go up that balcony even had it been opened. So, let's continue just a bit more up the steps to enter the upper castle, where suddenly my accent will change. Because here, 100 years ago, the first horror film in our history, Nosferatu, was filmed. Well, bits of it. That's why we came at the end of October, just several days before Halloween. It's a great moment and a great place. And what you're seeing are works by students of a local school connected to the anniversary. But first and foremost, let me tell you a bit about the film, because there was an issue. It is officially based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, but they didn't get the rights to the book. So there is no Count Dracula, there is Count Orlok, and there are no vampires in this film in particular, they're Nosferatu. Anyway, we've got the typical story here. You've got an Englishman here called Hutter, who came to sign some documents with Count Orlok. At the very moment you see him in a local tavern, and actually it was supposedly filmed in an actual local tavern of the town at the feet of the castle, Orawski pod Zamok. Well, anyway, you don't only have locals here as extras. There's one particular natural extra, the Tatra mountains. They are as beautiful today as they were 100 years ago. Definitely good enough to play Transylvania. Another thing that can play Transylvania properly is the fact that this region here 100 years ago did not have too much asphalt, as you are going to see in a second. So also in this case it was giving the film a proper kind of faraway, abandoned feel. Another very important issue for me this time, please do not laugh when I start speeding up the clips. Obviously, this is something that was traditionally done more than 100 years ago. So, it's a very serious thing. Don't laugh, or I'm gonna give you this look. Anyway, let's get to the source. Let's go to the castle now. So, here you are, right in front of you, Orawa Castle becoming the castle of the first film vampire, Nosferatu. Now this lovely gazebo we are not going to see, unfortunately, because it is currently under renovation, but you can see it at least from below. There it is in front of you. Now there are things we are not going to see. Where I am walking at the very moment, where you have those stairs which are obviously not medieval, there used to be something else. Here you've got a wall that the main protagonist was running out of. Well, that wall did not survive. And one extra little bit, there is an entrance unfortunately closed to a basement. Well, it was no basement in the film, it was the crypt of Nosferatu himself. So let me put it like this. The film is 100 years old, obviously kind of difficult and kind of silly for us today, but do watch it. It is a classic, and I have to say, it actually, there's more tension in it than in all of the Twilight trilogy, alright? So do watch it. But of course, I got so much into the issue that I could not avoid a bit of film infantilism as well. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, so we are going to say, with this beautiful view in front of you, we are going to say goodbye to the Orava castle. And I mentioned at the beginning, it's going to be just a bit, just relaxed. Well, those of you who watch my clips for a long time now, I think you understand. In such cases, do not trust my words. But it could not be different if we are here, if we are in the castle at Orava, my true love and passion. And I hope that after watching the clip, after visiting it with me, you love the place as passionately as I do. And if you ever manage to come to Slovakia, do not dare leave the country without visiting this place. It will enchant you just like it enchanted me. But before we leave, shout out to our lovely guide. Thank you very much for your help. As we had a film, Time for Gaming as well, the last Slovak national idea in Europa Universalis, and to drown the sorrows, beer from a local brewery. And we will have to drown sorrows because we're not only saying goodbye to the Orava castle, we actually saying goodbye to our Big Slovak Adventure. Bam, just like that, it ended. Now the mountain on the horizon is Babia Góra. I was raised on the other side, and later as an adult I started looking for interesting places all around the world. And look, just across the border, just across the mountain when I was raised, 25 episodes we had from this country which nobody knows about and confused with Slovenia, right? And we had everything. We had history, castles, cities, some difficult topics, but wine as well. There is everything here. So if you watched it with me, the whole Big Slovak Adventure, I hope you have the same feelings as I have. I loved it. If you just stumbled upon me now, watch it from the beginning. I honestly think it's worth it. And if you can come here and follow in my footsteps, that's even better. For now, I am going to say goodbye, and a bit of a sad mood I have to say, but then again, when something ends, something new begins, right? So instead of goodbye, see you soon.